Hi, so in this presentation, this is going to be the first of several presentations along these lines. This one is just supposed to be an introductory one, which focuses on a fairly straightforward idea, but one that's also fairly profound, and that is the words change. It's constant. Languages are constantly changing, the words in languages are constantly changing, the sounds of the words change, as well as the meanings. And with taboo words, this happens more quickly. So it's just an accelerated process with taboo words. And we'll start with some. Now this one isn't actually taboo, but it's kind of an interesting example that's illustrative of how words can change in surprising ways. So bless, which we think of as being this good modern day Christian word, well, didn't start that way. Originally, it came from an Old English word, bledsin, meant to mark with blood, right? So it was this pagan ritual. You can see then in that Old English word, we've got the predecessor to the modern English word, blood, bled, was there. It was a marking with blood, very pagan ritual, which then eventually the term was adapted into Christianity and came to mean what it means today. Here's another one that's probably not thrown around a lot today, but it's a term that also is illustrative of how words change, and especially it's going to get us into some of the principles we're going to be looking at later with regard to taboo words. So, cretin means simply an idiot, a stupid person, somebody who's uncultured perhaps. And it was borrowed, as you might expect, from French, where it basically means stupid, right? So somebody who is a crétin is a stupid person. But it ultimately derives from the Latin word Christianum, or the French word crétin, which means Christian. It originally meant Christian. And how that happened is interesting. We'll jump into that a little bit. So how did Christian get associated with stupid? Well, it started with this idea, this theological idea, that all human beings have souls, and that's what differentiates us from the beasts, the other animals who don't have souls. And so what happened then is that in a sort of early form of PCism, we started saying everybody was a crétin, a Christian, meaning this is a human being. Even though they might be disabled, even though they might be incredibly unintelligent, they're still human, they're still Christians, they still have a soul. So that's what they were getting at theologically and socially, right? Again, this was kind of a politically correct idea here. And where it started getting focused on stupid person was from this Swiss-French dialect. So there's a part of Switzerland, in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, where in the Alps there was this genetic deformity. So certain people seemed to be genetically predisposed to being deformed. So many people were being born that way, both physically and mentally. And as you can imagine, right, many centuries ago, people who were deformed were not treated kindly. And so then the more politically correct elements of society said, well, look, we have to treat these people well, even though they may be stupid and mentally deformed, or physically deformed, they are still humans. They're still, then, quote, Christians, chrétiens. And what happened then is that they started referring to these people as chrétiens in an attempt to sort of reform society, to make people realize that these people were good people, good humans. But what happens then is that this becomes more and more associated with those deformed people, mentally and physically deformed people, and so then it started being used as a slur for anybody who you consider to be stupid. And we're going to see exactly how that process works in a future presentation. Here's another one that I think is fairly interesting, and that is ass. which, you know, it's only a moderately taboo word in modern English in the United States. And in fact, in England, it's even less taboo than it is in the United States. Now, I think we are aware that ass also means donkey, right? But the question is, well, how did it get there? So, a big question I like to ask students is most people are familiar with this other form, arse, right? Which is typically British, right? We don't say arse in the United States very much. I mean, I can't think of anybody I've ever heard actually use arse who was not British. So, the question I like to ask students is, which is worse? Which one is more taboo to your ear? I'll let you think about that for a moment. Now, when I've done this in face-to-face courses, what I found is that most students in the class, the vast majority in fact, say that they find ass to be more taboo. But the interesting thing is it's actually just the opposite in England. In England, arse would be the more taboo. And that actually reflects the history of the words, where ass originally meant just donkey, as I was saying. That was the original meaning of ass. Arse originally just meant butt, right? And so, obviously, not surprisingly, arse became a taboo word. And what seemed to happen is that ass, especially in the United States, started being used as a euphemism for arse. That ass was used as a substitute because it sounds similar, right? And especially in an R-less dialect. So think about Boston, where instead of saying car, you would say caw, right? Well, in that case, you can imagine that arse would be us, and ass would sound pretty similar. So, not surprising that this would be a good candidate for a euphemism for arse. But what happened is then it started getting too closely associated in our thoughts, and eventually it overtook arse, which kind of fell out of use in American English. Ass substituted for it, and we then no longer liked the word ass, and we had to find another word for donkey. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a future presentation, how donkey came to be. So this is just an introduction to this idea that the words change. We'll look at exactly how they can change in a bit.